What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in the watch world over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to be covering a range of topics. A lot of drama. I wasn't expecting there to be so much drama about some watch releases. It's quite interesting, but it's a good reminder of how passionate watch collectors are and how the community, I think, like I said, can be very passionate. Can be pretty divided in opinions, but I also think it was a good reminder of how, at the end of the day, these are just watches, and I think we can put, personal feelings aside pretty easily, or at least I hope that the watch community can do so. So we're going to cover a range of topics. We'll go through them kind of in order here. But as always, love to hear what you think about these, so don't be shy. Send us a message on Instagram if you wanna let us know what you think. So I'll talk about the first thing, which is undoubtedly the reason maybe why you've clicked on this podcast, or undoubtedly something that definitely is on the top of your mind, and that was the Massena Lab and Revolution collaboration for their Uni Racer 1949, where, we'll talk about opinions. Anyway, so I'll kind of give you a little bit of a background on this before I sort of dive into sort of my thoughts on it. So, Revolution Watch and Massena Labs collaborated to create a limited edition piece that was called the Uni Racer 1949. Now, the watch was inspired by a Patek Philippe reference 130 chronograph from 1949. This watch was featured in Alvaro Montanari's Patek Philippe Steel Watches book, and is an extremely rare example of the 130 with an incredibly unique dial configuration. Now, obviously, this makes this watch extremely attractive to many collectors, and puts this watch really at the forefront of the reference 130, but also at the forefront of vintage chronographs, steel chronographs today. So what Revolution Watch and Massena Labs did was basically create a watch that looks very similar in proportions, in case design, in dial layout, to that original 130. Now, if you don't know, Massena Labs is run by William Massena, who is an icon and legend in the watch industry. And he created this, Massena Labs, and he kind of describes it as his horological think tank. And to quote the article that I'll put in the show notes, it is a place where we can explore the question, what if? If I remember as a collector, we would always ask each other, what if a brand were to make this or that version of their watch? Or they were to resurrect a past icon. That's really the purpose of Massena Labs, is to explore those. And they have done so many different collaborations in the past with some pretty iconic pieces. To name a couple, they've collaborated with Louis Erard. They've collaborated with the likes of MBNF and Lepe to create their T-Rex in bronze. Unimatic they've collaborated with, so a lot of Habring as well. So a lot of different brands that they've collaborated with to create these pieces that sort of answer the question of what if in William Massena's mind. So one of the things that they said is, what if Patek Philippe was to resurrect the reference 130 chronograph from 1949 and create this piece in today's environment. Now, I think on its basis, they're creating 120 of these watches, priced just shy of 4,000 or 3,750 USD. So on the surface, it's a cool sort of exploration of the watch, and obviously the very historical icon for Patek Philippe and chronograph collectors at their core. Now, where the drama sort of started was when people started to see this watch and really kind of talk about the idea that this watch was extremely close to the original. There really wasn't a lot that the brand did differently, or Massena Labs did differently to create a watch that was not just taking something from the past, putting it into production and selling it. The watch is 39 millimeters, stainless steel case, has pump pushers. It has a tachymeter scale with a blue hour and minutes hand that's filled with superluminova, with a glossy black dial, a really unique sector track dial featuring Roman numerals that are filled with superluminova. And the watch is running on a hand-winding Sellita's SW510 movement. If you turn the watch over, it has a case-back signature for Massena Labs and describes which version of the 120 pieces that specific watch is. Now, the criticism really came is, this essentially was identical to the Patek Philippe 130. So on one hand, I can see the criticism they're receiving. And I've spoken about it before on Life on the Wrist, probably a couple years ago at this point. I haven't really spoken about it recently, but it's really important to ensure that as a brand or a watchmaker, you don't rely too heavily on your heritage and the things that you've done in the past that work. Because if someone looks back at this time, you want to make sure that they can say, oh, that's something that they created during this time, and it's relevant for that time period, and showed the brand pushing innovation forward and design forward to create something lasting and something that will be interesting for people when they look back during this time. I actually think a perfect example of a brand who's done that is Audemars Piguet when they released the Code 1159. It was met with mixed feelings, but I actually think it did exactly what I would hope a brand would do, is kind of push themselves to create something innovative and not rest on their laurels too heavily. Now, this is Massena Labs, right? This is a person who is interested in asking the question, what if, for different brands and collaborating in different ways. So really, it's not a brand who's trying to push this. This is really just a brand that's trying to create something interesting here and bring back to life. Maybe some people don't really know that this reference 130 was around. Anyway, that's the sort of idea there. But I think the criticism that they received was, well, it seems very commercial for someone to bring this back, basically copy the same design and put it on the market and sell them. Which I think you can see that argument as well, right? It's a commercial endeavor that doesn't really show too much innovation. I'll say too much innovation comparatively to some of the other things that Massena Labs has done. And I'm not, again, I'm trying to be neutral here in what I'm saying. There's no criticism, right? This is I'm trying to lay out the facts here. So anyway, I think that's was sort of one side of the arguments that were made. The other side of the arguments that were made was really about the idea that this is an iconic piece. This is a piece that stands on its own, really, when you are looking at these incredibly beautiful watches that no one probably... I guarantee that there were many collectors who didn't even know this watch existed until this watch was released. And what Massena Labs and Revolution is trying to do is really showcase how incredibly iconic this watch is, and how important it is to the history of Patek Philippe and the history of watch design. And I think that is a completely valid reason for creating a watch like this. And that's actually a really important thing for people to do, is to make sure that people know about these iconic pieces, these pieces that really changed or write and change watch history. So there's a lot of stuff on Instagram that people started posting. It seemed like the Instagram was divided for a long period of time just because of this single release, which is never nice. I think Instagram is obviously a place for watch collecting, and watch collectors sort of spend a lot of their time, and it's never nice when you basically see such a combative environment. It's not the best place. And I think both sides sort of went to great lengths of posting stories and posting update videos and commenting on things that other people commented on, and definitely an interesting sort of time period for people talking about this. Something else that was sort of brought up is the idea, like, if Patek Philippe wanted to bring back this design, I think they would themselves. Hey, I guess we will never know because it's Patek Philippe. But what was really nice to see at the end of the day is it seemed like people were able to put their sort of egos and put their opinions aside and kind of just come together and say, look, I don't like this watch, but I respect you and we'll just move on. The other side said, look, this is our watch. I will try and respect your opinion and we can just both move on from this. If you want to know my opinions, I feel like I've kind of discussed it throughout this, but I think it's pretty simple, right? This is displaying it is bringing to light an iconic watch that has an important part of the stainless steel chronograph history of Patek Philippe. It was created with Massena Labs and Revolution to really display that. You don't have to love it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to buy it. If this watch speaks to you, then I think it's great that you buy it, and it is, and you'll have a pretty cool watch in your collection. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. And I think that's really at the end of the day where most people landed, and I think that was a very civil way of sort of ending this whole saga. A lot of stuff happened with this, but I think at the end of the day, it's a cool watch for some, it's not a cool watch for others, and you buy what you like, back to the golden rule, buy what you like, and, I'm quoting John Goldberger here a little bit, but buy what you like. If you like it, you can buy it. If you don't, no need to. And I think it's also just important to, respect other people's opinions from both sides. If someone else doesn't like it and you do, just respect that's their opinion. And if you don't like it and you want to criticize those who do, try and keep it to yourself because, watch collecting is way more important, way bigger than that. Anyway, we'll move on to maybe a little bit of other drama. I actually want to give a massive shout out to Perezscope because Jose there has released some incredibly important articles where he sort of dives into watches that he's seeing at auction and making sure that they are kosher, that they are, what they are being represented as. And one of the watches that he kind of played a huge integral role was that Omega that sold at Philips that was basically caught as being a mishmash of many different parts, and big drama in Switzerland where it involved people who worked for Omega, the Omega Museum, and I think there's a big lawsuit there as well. Anyway, I wanted to honestly just share one of his articles with you. I won't get it too in depth with it, but he looked at the antiquarian auction that was going on in Monaco, where there were some really great watches that were being sold. I've featured a lot of them on my Instagram because I do think there are some cool pieces that Antiquarium sells. But he kind of called out this Rolex Bull-Gauss that he coined as Bull-Gauss for a couple of things. And he's got an incredible database of these watches and where these are coming from, and does some really nice analyses to really make sure that what you're buying is what you think you're getting. I'll give a brief overview, but please go to the show notes if you want to read it. And Perezscope does some really nice articles, so it'd be great if you followed his Instagram or looked at his website regularly, because it really was great. So he looked at this reference 6541 that was selling at Antiquarium in Monaco, and basically traced this watch back to November 2017 when it was auctioned by Antiquarium in Geneva for 81,250 Swiss francs. At the time, the watch actually had an interesting Submariner bezel insert. He then found in 2019 that the same watch was offered in Luxembourg, and according to the Wayback Machine, it was marketed as sold in mid 2020. So when you look at this watch, it actually has a really beautiful tropical dial, but if you actually look a little bit closer, what Perezscope sort of postures is the fact that there actually might be a little bit, it looks a little bit more like water damage than anything. When something's described as tropical, it really just means it's been patinaed, but it's in great condition. But this actually kind of looks a little bit more like water damage. Now, patina is subjective. I think I say that on regularly, but each their own on that front. He then kind of looked at the bezel insert because that was the thing that was kind of noted as being an interesting part of the watch, and found that a lot of the serifs that you'd expect on a Bull-Gauss insert were missing, which is another sort of pointer to this. He then looked at the case back and found that there were some inconsistencies with the details there. The patented designation and the production date were missing from the case back. He then looked at the movement where basically there's a ring that goes around the movement that was made of an incorrect metal. So he does some really great work to sort of investigate these watches, and I really wanted to highlight this because it really is an important part of buying, because when you're looking at these extremely rare and costly watches, you want to know what you're buying, and I think Perezscope does a really nice job of calling those out. So check out the links in the show notes if you want to see this full article, because it really was eye-opening, and yeah. So I'll move away a little bit from the drama and sort of go over some new releases, and I'll start off with the June 2023 Swiss watch export results. So Swiss watch exports really showed no sign of weakness in June. It was quite the opposite. The positive trend seen in May continued with growth of 14% compared to June 2022. This meant that the first half of the year ended on a particularly strong note at 13.3 billion Swiss francs, or up by 11.8% compared to the previous year. The 12-month moving average has really stuck around just positive of 10% over the last 12 months, which is really, really positive. I think, economically speaking, I think things have been okay. I think people are still consuming. We'll see what happens economically, because that will obviously have a impact on watch markets, of course, luxury goods. So it will be interesting to see what happens with that. But it is a nice change, because I remember a couple years ago, Swiss watch industry was struggling to grow by 4%, and to be growing at something like just over 10% month over month is a real positive sign. So it's a nice thing to see for the industry that we all love. Of course, in the show notes, I'll leave the full report so you can read through that. It goes through things like case metal and main markets and price categories. Hodinkee collaborated with Hublot to create a classic fusion in titanium, which was a pretty interesting move. I think Hublot is a very divisive company. Nico Leonard obviously hates them. Some people love them. We see them on wrists of many people. But Hodinkee collaborated with them and created a pretty cool piece. I think from a story perspective, it was quite cool. So in 2012, Hublot actually sort of followed the auto industry and began providing a plastic quartz-powered watch to its customers to keep their risk company while their own watch was in the shop. This is similar to how one would get a loaner car from a local dealership if you were having your car serviced. These watches were exclusively offering was only available at the Hublot Atelier, and the loaner watch was unavailable for purchase, clearly marked on the dial a watch that says not for sale. sometimes customers would want to sort of break those rules, and so there were requests from purchasers to sort of keep those loaner watches or buy those loaner watches. And so what Hodinkee and Hublot decided to do was to create a Classic Fusion limited edition for Hodinkee, where they took this idea and created a watch that, instead of saying not for sale on the dial, they said not for resale on the dial. I think it's a cool story. People will have their opinions on the Classic Fusion and Hublots. There will be hundreds of these made. They're probably all sold out by the time you're listening to this. It's a cool concept. I don't think you can look past that. And it's in gray, which is a very Hodinkee color. I think you can enjoy the story, at least if you don't like the brand. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that as well. The last couple of weeks have also been swarmed by the Barbie and Oppenheimer films that are being shown. I haven't seen either of them. I really want to see them, so hopefully that will be something I can do soon. But obviously, watch aficionados, watch collectors are looking at the wrists of these individuals. And I wanted to talk about Oppenheimer because I think that's the one that I really do want to see. I think Cillian Murphy's an incredible actor. I loved him in Peaky Blinders, and I think from what I can tell, people are saying that he's getting raving reviews for this movie. But what's really cool is there were 3 Hamilton watches that were worn by Cillian Murphy's character, Oppenheimer, in the film, and they were a Hamilton cushion, a Lexington, and an Endicott. And I think it puts you in the time perfectly. I mean, talk about classic American watches that were probably worn by many people during this time period. If I had to choose, I really love the Endicott. The Endicott numerals are really beautiful, but the cushion is and the cathedral hands on that cushion are just so nice. Hodinkee did a nice article. Shout out to them. Shout out to Danny Milton, who wrote the article. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check those out, but thought I'd mention that. Lastly, I wanted to give a big shout out to Anthony Trena over at Hodinkee, who did an article. The article is titled "What This Vintage Cartier Tank Cintré Tells Us About the Future of Restoration." So there was a platinum Tank Cintré that sold for about $350 USD at Christie's, and the watch was, I believe, lightly restored in 1999 by Cartier. Now, it's believed that the watch is now with Davide Parmigiani, who was able to purchase this watch. It was for him it was the trophy of this last spring auction, is sort of what he posted on Instagram, where he basically described the fact that this was one of the very best examples that he had the chance to see in over 35 years, and that he was going to be the sort of new caretaker of this watch. Now, you have to remember that this watch was restored. This watch was, the dial was restored by Cartier, and I think many people have different opinions about that, especially in the watch world, about restoration when it comes to watch dials. Now, I don't want to spoil the article that Anthony wrote, so please go in the show notes if you want to read the rest of it, but I thought it was an interesting sort of discussion about restoration and the idea that, can you do restoration in a good way that allows for the watch to continue to be valued by collectors? It's an interesting concept. I think you can try and be as original as possible. You can try and do things to the T of what the original makers wanted to do, or send it to Cartier to do so. And you can come back with a watch that is near perfect, or near as close to being as original, like it was intended to come out of the watch factory. But I think people just have to get comfortable with the idea that is something that's going to have to happen. It happens in art collecting, it happens in car collecting. it's something that does take place with things that are over. I mean, this watch was from the 1920s, 1926. So we're talking almost 100 years old. And you know, are you going to be are collectors going to be comfortable with the fact that that's just something that's the reality of collecting watches and collecting things that are over 100 years old? I think it's just going to take time for people to get accustomed to the idea. But I do think even now, compared to maybe 3 years ago, people are being way more open to the idea of this. And to have someone as iconic as Davide Parmigiani saying this type of thing is telling. And if you think that he is someone who has a lot of knowledge and feels that, and you feel that he's thinking about watches in the way that you want to think about them, then, you know, maybe things will change. So go check out the article written by Anthony. It was really great. I call him Anthony. I think people call him Tony. But go check it out. It really is a great article. I'll leave a link in the show notes to all the things that we've spoken about so far. Anyway, I hope you kind of enjoyed some of the topics we discussed today. Kind of ran the gamut of topics. But hey, hopefully you find something interesting in that. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to subscribe or follow this podcast. And if you wouldn't mind rating it, really does help me out. Positive ratings always help, and if you want to hear something on the podcast that we missed, let us know. Be sure to hit us up on Instagram or on our website if you want to chat about any of the topics we discussed in this podcast so far. And yeah, as I said, everything's in the show notes if you want to check it out, so be sure to head over there once we conclude this podcast, or while you were listening. I hope you did. With that said, guys, I will catch you in the next podcast. Take it easy.